Welcome. This is Blacklisted News Radio. My name is Doug Owen, and I am your host. I'm the senior editor of blacklistednews.com, and you can join me online Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. for this live recorded podcast, streaming live at blacklistedраdio.com. Welcome. Also follow us on Twitter at BLN Radio. That's the best way to keep up with the show. I've got a lot of thoughts. I want to talk about the missing flight 377, the Malaysian Airlines, and what the latest is. And I haven't really been vocal or following the story on the website because I think for the most part it's a huge distraction. But there's something going on there, and I think that now we have a lot more to talk about. We've seen a lot of the anomalies, and the general public's pretty interested. I was listening to a sports radio talk show just yesterday, and they were discussing the Malaysian Flight 377. One of the things that right out of the gates that we should take note is that there are transponders. They were intentionally turned off. Now, there's only two ways that happens. Either you turn them off, or something so horrific that happened blew this plane to pieces, smithereens, and there's several transponders. Notably, the Rolls-Royce engines do have their own transponders because Rolls-Royce, I mean, they don't want to take the blame or get into a lawsuit for one of their engines failing. So, I mean, the safeguards and the amount of forethought that goes into the design and engineering so that things like what happened with Flight 377 do not happen. So I think that's important to note that this thing has been kind of built up as this huge mystery. And one of the things that I think is the most compelling to not just myself and probably you, but the general public is that the telephones were still working. Allegedly, you could call these numbers and they would still ring. Now, the response by the telecommunications companies, okay, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, has been kind of cloudy. They say, well, and they've made some of these statements that I think were off the cuff and maybe a little bit premature. They didn't get their talking points, but to have these things communicating and then to say, well, let's back up. We don't really understand or know what's happening or why they're doing this. Number one, I do have a background in telecommunications extensively, almost 20 years in telecommunications. And if those phones are ringing, and yes, it could be a faux ring. I mean, your cell phone device, when you pick it up, or your telephone calling whoever it may be, when you call the switch, you get a ring back. The switch being the telephone system. You get a ring back at the first point where you're actually getting that signal that you can hear. You get this ring back just to let you know that your call is en route. So that in and of itself does not mean that the phone is working. You might be able to hear, the message come on, and you're like, okay, well, it's not broken. But that's a casual observer's take on it. When you have the telephone company saying, well, yeah, they're kind of working, but we don't know where they're at, that's a complete and absolute lie. Those switches, each and every one of those relays along the line, to the point where it goes over satellite, up and down communication through the cloud, is all, that's the metadata. It's all cataloged, and that path can be mapped. So the fact that they think that these things are working, but they can't tell you where they're at, that is complete BS. And we're not talking about GSM systems. I mean, we've got LTE, 4E, LG. I'm not an expert on it, but we do have geolocation tracking. My smartphone is always trying to turn that on. It's always looking for some signal. And that's why I leave it at home most of the time. It's just a little computer, but it's definitely doing its own thing. I was noting, and most of you already know this, most of you techies, that with the new Android OS, you can't opt out of the presidential debates. Yesterday I got an Amber Alert. It scares the crap out of you. And all of a sudden you get this alert saying that there's somebody, a child taken, 500 miles from here, which in a Mazda 6. And it's like, well, I guess it's good information if I live there, but it does do it by targeted location. I just think that the parameters are too large. If I'm 500 miles away, I don't need an Amber Alert. And I can opt out of those alerts, but you cannot. It's grayed out. You can't opt out of the Obama alert or whoever it may be. And I was joking with a friend of mine and said, well, people aren't going to be upset until it's Rand Paul or some other Republican that's calling you up on the phone. All of these, I hate to call them hipsters, but and really, it's so broad, you can't really categorize people into the phone culture, although there's some that are more into it than others. Nonetheless, the fact that the phone companies cannot track these phones and that they are actually operating leads me to one of two conclusions here. Number one, they do know where they're at, and they have received a letter from the government telling them to not release this information, or somebody on the inside has said, shut up, no more, no more of this. Okay, that makes sense. Or B, you have some other entity that's running cover. Namely, this Tech Dirt article kind of highlights one of my possible theses for this. Law enforcement agencies all over California have been secretly using Stingray devices. If you're not familiar, Tech Dirt brings us up to speed. More documents have been uncovered via FOIA requests that show local law enforcement agencies in California have been operating cell phone tower spoofers, Stingray devices, in complete secrecy and wholly unregulated. Now, here's the deal. Anyone, namely private contractor corporations or any police entity globally that has suitcase, internet, or one of these Stingray devices could be spoofing those phones. They could be actually taking those phone numbers and all of those lines, and when they're called, and actually spoofing them, making it seem as if those people are calling their phones, and then recording that information, possibly tracking that data. That's what the police departments do, and it's not out of the realm to think that some kind of private nefarious entity or government agency could be spoofing these phones, especially if they took this plane, commandeered it, and this is just a theory. If you think about it in a managed government false flag way, they could have taken it easily to Diego Garcia. We know that there's enough gas, and that is pretty much a secret military base. It's not that secret. Most people know about Diego Garcia. It would be in the pathway. It wouldn't be hard to commandeer and take it. But we're talking about professionals here. In any direction we go with the story, the idea that this, and there's a bunch of ridiculous conspiracy theories that have already been planted, and I think they've been planted by the media, by the establishment, that there are directed energy weapons that blew this thing to pieces. And all in all fairness, that technology we do know does exist, and I hate to sound like the crazy guy, but I don't think that that's necessarily outside of the scope and realm. Now, there's a lot of interesting people, the backstory that's already been created. You've got the Freescale workers that are there on the plane. You've got other people that would be targeted possibly by the Malaysian or Chinese airline or Chinese government. And so lots of political possible players. You have, of course, the story about the Iranian nationals that are in several. Who knows how? Because some of these stories come out and then they're immediately redacted. It's hard to keep up with what's real, what's BS, what is just psyops that has been pushed out there just to get people, oh my God, these are Iranians, and that kind of also tells us who may be behind the media psyop itself. And look at the players. Who likes to demonize Iran the most? Who is banging that drum constantly and using that as a way to extort money from the American people? Who wins? Who benefits? Jordan. We could say Jordan, Israel. We're seeing quite a row even in the Middle East between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of players that could have their hands in the mix, but the technology that would have to be used and the type of professionals that would get onto this plane, be able to not just couple transponders, but to actually deactivate the ones in the engine, to have complete control, and to be able to make this thing vanish. I mean, it's very easy to get on this thing and blow it up. I mean, you you can get somebody like the crotch bomber who had a front row VIP experience at the airport when guys in sports coats put him on the plane with his crotch bomb. So it's easy to get on the plane if you know the right people, wink, wink, to get on a plane and blow it up. Not hard to do. But in the amount of attention and focus, it reminds me of a story about a congressman named Larry McDonald. If you're not familiar with Larry McDonald, there's great exchanges between him and Pat Buchanan about the Council on Foreign Relations and the sinister communist plot to go after the dollar. So anyway, interestingly enough, he was invited to South Korea to go, and they had this event for, it was an anniversary of their independence, celebrating their constitution and their democracy. And lo and behold, during the highlight of the Cold War, this must have been in the early mid-'80s. I want to say 84, but don't quote me on that. I'm just going off the old noggin here. The long short of it was the Chinese, wink, wink, shot this plane down with Larry McDonald, who happened to be taking over the head of the John Birch Society. And the Republicans and Democrats and just about everybody else did not like JBS. I think it's completely, I wouldn't say compromised at this point totally, but the political antiquated Christian aspect of all of that is kind of it's a turnoff to me, because I'm not trying to live in some theocracy run by it's not a viable option. I hate to throw stones at everyone, because I mean there are some good reporting that comes from JBS, and I think what it was about 30 years ago was a lot more important than what it is today. And so Larry McDonald, he was on that plane. Lo and behold, what a coincidence. And that's how he was killed, right before he took over the JBS. And it's never really been the same since. So look into Larry McDonald's interesting story about what happened to him. And definitely a high-profile, high-value asset that just happened to be on this plane the Chinese shot down. Just happened. It's not a conspiracy. Just a hell of a coincidence. Regardless, that was very instrumental in steering this country forward, because there was this huge divide. And we saw that again in the 1990s with Project Megiddo. So not to get just into the PSYOP aspect, but I think it's the most important aspect of Flight 377, and that is the chase. And it's distracting from what's happening in Ukraine, the standoff between Russia and the West, and most of those other, I think, very important stories, though getting plenty of attention, so I don't necessarily have to focus on them. I did look at 377 in some other light, and I went to the gematria calculator just to see what 377 would bring up, just to see if there's anything more to it. And I liked what I came up with here. Alien clicking, terminate, Bible preachers, the satanic age, and you can get this all out of the number 377. It's just math. Mother of all, great change, and boiling frogs. So there's a few interesting terminologies, and I didn't go through the Jewish and the Christian gematria to really break all of those down, but you can do it for yourself. I just like doing it just to see what other kind of occultic references may be there, if convenient. I think the occult always, it gets when people focus on it, it becomes cheesy and silly and easily to be dismissed. But if you look at the reoccurrence of very powerful numbers, they don't necessarily mean a lot to Doug Owen, but they mean a lot to people that are signing documents, just about the best example would be Nancy and Ronald Reagan and all of the weird things that they did from the time that they would make speeches to the colors of their ties, and the fact that it seems like throughout history there's always been some high priest or magic man or astrologer that has been very influential. I mean, just look back at Rasputin. Pretty good example of people that influence high power. That so the significance sometimes will lead you to not so much. I care not that much about the magic aspect, more about who would be using that, who is into that kind of stuff, and it kind of leads me back to a whodunit scenario. So with the Malaysian Airlines, the telephone thing is complete BS. I think ultimately there's only a few agencies, including the NSA and CIA, which are at odds this week over the torture program and the Constitution for some and not for others. The Fourth Amendment for you and maybe not Dianne Feinstein. She thought she was an elite. Maybe bull crap, but it kind of really highlights what's happening here and the kind of agencies and shenanigans that may be happening in the background, and why I think this might be significant in that arena. I think that if there's any takeaways from this, it would be that whoever did this, it has to be a very high-tech job. Okay, you can't just make a plane go. You can blow a plane up pretty easily, as I said before, but to make it go missing and to create a global enigma, not nearly as easily. You have to be pretty up on what's going on, and I think it brings up this issue about where we're at today and the kind of technology that they're using already, and so people, the average public, probably has no idea that Stingray devices are being used on them or how that could be applicable to what's happening today. Homeland Security conducting unannounced lockdown drills. Got a little highlight this week from barista kids. And I guess this is for crunchy hipster children. We know our children, have lockdown drills. It's sad, unfortunate part of the world we live in. They kind of acquiesce to that. Shouldn't have to live in this age, but there are crazy people, so you might want to have a contingency plan. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong inherently with having a contingency plan for wacko people that do wacko things. I mean, the reality versus what I would like it to be are complete different. So if you have your kids in the government schools, this might be handy information. Duck and cover, though, has often been used as a way to traumatize children into fear and into statism. So, I mean, that's a whole show to itself. So anyway, Glen Ridge students had a lockdown drill supervised by none other than Homeland Security. And it's interesting because now Homeland Security and their expanding approach to and what they're involved with has now come to the schools, okay? Because you have teachers and teachers unions and school districts that are looking to solutions for themselves, arming teachers, hiring police officers, security guards, putting up chain link fences and razor wire. It's never really popular because it starts to look like a prison. Starts to look too much like what it actually is. Well, anyway, on Thursday, March 6th, the team comprised of 10 officials from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and Essex County Prosecutor's Office and the New Jersey Department of Education Safety and Security Task Forces. See what I'm saying? There's a lot of money in security. Listen to all these people and all these jobs. And in New Jersey, I doubt any of these get less than 70 GER. With the exception of Glen Ridge Superintendent John Morocco, Chief Police Sheila Lagatuta, that's definitely Italian, I just can't say it. No Glen Ridge Public School personnel received advance notice of this exercise. Okay, so basically you just have people in the upper administration that are giving the tip-off, and boom, you have the Homeland Security group here doing these unannounced drills. And this is the second of that we've had this month alone of surprise Homeland Security drills. Scared the crap out of neighbors, and I'm trying to think of the town it was in. Might have been New Jersey. But, there's so much of this, it just kind of, I become numb to it. Oh, yeah, there's Department of Homeland Security scaring the crap out of residents and, blowing up things and throwing flash bangs in the middle of the night. Just another day in the empire, or evening. So anyway, this goes on here. The federal state security team instructed Phillips to activate the school's lockdown protocol, and they went through all of it to make sure that the kids are in compliance and the school's in compliance and keeping them safe. And, it was great. Some of the parents are really outraged. I think that the more the state does this, the more it turns people against it. It's kind of like bad foreign policy. You blow up terrorists, and guess what? Or people that you allege are terrorists, but they're actually at a birthday party or a wedding. You create more and more of a backlash, and people are really going to, support the state less and less and less. But, I'm not running the Department of Homeland Security, nor am I looking for a new job. So it's completely just off the rails what's happening. Recently, there's this story, and let me see. I'll just pull it up. Teachers don't want to be shot during drill. Let's see if this brings me anything. There's a bunch of teachers that were asked in one of these drills if they could be shot with paintballs. Teachers don't want to be shot. Is this a good one? School shooting in California? No. Teachers don't want to be shot. Teachers' guns. I'm going to put drill in here. Sorry. St. Francis, KMOV.com reports out of St. Louis that teachers call for help after getting... Oh, this isn't it. Yeah, they have an active shooter drill. Yeah, they were shot with airsoft guns at a high school in St. Louis. So, and they didn't know what was happening, and they're like, hey, this is not cool at all to be the target in your drill, to be used as your example. And, what benefit does any of this occur? Okay, so what happens when you see this? Does it make you any safer? I mean, I know it's horrible and it's a psychological operation, but beyond that, beyond the mental deficit some of these people have to institute policies that result in you shooting teachers with airsoft guns, which is just beyond me. How many people go to one of these meetings and think, this is a great idea, Bob. Let's go ahead and do that Monday morning. That's going to enrich the kids' lives, and it's going to help save them. I'm sure a few of them. I'm sure a few of these people actually buy into that. But nonetheless, the sad reality is that, one, there's no benefit to it. It doesn't help people to see, to put them in fear. If anything, you want people to feel empowered. Okay, so if you're running and ducking and hiding and waiting to be shot, that's not productive. That's not going to mitigate the situation in any way. Okay, there's things that you can do, and I guess you should probably lock the back door so creepy people, regardless of who they are, don't come in. But the expansion of the Department of Homeland Security into all of this has become just sad, and it shows us that there's a lack of things that need to be secured in the homeland. Okay, so it used to be about fighting terrorists, and finally we've now just turned this into, a compliance office. It's going to be like the IRS, and they're going to come by your school, and they're going to do audits, and they're going to recommend all of these, very expensive new things that you have to do, and they'll have Homeland Security safety initiatives. You'll see this in a few years. Now it might sound silly, but in a few years, you're going to go by the local high school, and it's going to have some Department of Homeland Security stickers. You're going to go to the office to take your kids in there. They're going to tell you how safe they are and how great it is, and they have a local Department of Homeland Security Gestapo office that can see all of the cameras and watch your kids in the bathroom. And people are like, oh, man, that's great. Whew, thank you for that. All right, so, yeah, and speaking of dumb politicians, I'm going to just throw this one out here because it makes me laugh. And you've probably already heard about it. It made headlines. Here's Sheila Jackson Lee.
Thanks to the distinguished members of the majority, the Republicans, my chairman and others, for giving us an opportunity to have a deliberative constitutional discussion that reinforces the sanctity of this nation and how well it is that we have lasted some 400 years operating under a constitution that clearly defines what is constitutional and what is not.
That's right. Since 1614 here on this great continent, turn that down, we have been operating under the Constitution. Come on, Sheila. She's always saying ridiculous things, and if there's anyone out there that listens to this show that has ever voted for her or has continued to do so, listening to her, I mean, I understand why she does well in Houston, and that's because the people that vote for her just don't listen to her, and most of them they just want gimmies. They don't give a crap about how smart she is or whether or not she's, and why would you? Because what can she really, really do? I mean, at the end of the day, there's not a lot that she probably has control over other than transportation and a few other key things in the Houston area that probably she doles out the goodies to the people, and that's what makes people excited. I don't care who you are. Even Ron Paul, took a little federal money for Jackson County, where he was, is it Jackson? I don't want to mistake that. But anyway, when he was a congressman and he was down on the Gulf Coast, because people want stuff, they want a new bridge or whatever it may be. And so that's how you get into politics. I understand how politicking works because really you're there to make the majority of people happy and support them and to give them what they want. You're supposed to do that. But at the end of the day, everybody wants to have some goodies, and that's why they let stuff like this pass. That's why it's okay. So I do want to talk about Rand Paul for a moment, and not just to beat him up, but because of the divisions in the deep state, or in the shadow government, if you will. But I think that it's interesting, and this probably is dividing a lot of libertarians and those that are part of Ron Paul Incorporated, the Mises Institute, the Lou Rockwells out there. Definitely the anarcho-capitalist libertarian aspect of the freedom movement. I hate to put all those labels out there, but most of us identify with, I think, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and trying to extend that to all in this country at the root. I mean, you want accountability. I want accountability. I want criminals to go to jail. That way it de-incentivizes other people to do bad things like steal money from the American people. It's really common sense. I mean, accountability, it's a very minimalized idea in most people's minds because you just don't have to have it. And if you vote for any of the, if you're a big fan of either of the parties, you probably don't care much about accountability, or it's just not really paramount to you. So anyway, Lee Rogers writes from the Daily Slave here, and pretty harsh words. It's completely insane that there are people, so-called freedom and patriot movement, that support Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. This is a man who has completely sold his soul to the interest of international Zionism. I have to agree. I really do. If you think it's about expanding Israel's influence in the Middle East and spending billions of dollars on protecting their security, meanwhile we have people being chased around and harassed by our own domestic police departments, you might be a Zionist. Anyway, if his previous meetings with neoconservatives and his trip to Israel wasn't bad enough, his recent opinion piece published in Time magazine conclusively proves which side he is on. Paul says that he is supportive of taking decisive measures against Vladimir Putin's alleged aggression, even though there's no proof that any real Russian invasion of Crimea has even taken place. The Russians have had a military base there for years, and many of the men roaming the streets appear to be members of local militias. Who knows, right? I don't think that the local militias have APCs, but the local, police departments, that's how they police over there. My local police department has an APC, so not necessarily Russian troops, but, let's be honest. I mean, none of these guys have any kind of insignia, not even their local militia. It would look more legitimate, Vladimir, and just think about this, guys, to give them some kind of insignia. Maybe a local militia insignia, so that way people would say, okay, well, that might be local militia, not Russian troops. But regardless of this, they're allowed to have 25,000 troops on the peninsula there. The annexing of Crimea it's not going to be that big of a deal other than to the people in that region. And I hate to say this, and it might just sound cold and callous, but who cares? Who cares? The international community sees the referendum, which is a vote, just to confuse all of you freaking stupid people out there. They're having a vote to see if not that you're listening to this show, but to see if the people want their own autonomy. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you can do that here in this country. Now, I'm sure if Texas decided to try to succeed, there'd be a lot of people calling it anarchy and terror. Those terms are just very popular with the current elite political class. Nonetheless, just to wrap up with Rand. Rand is, he's a neocon, and it's a divisive platform for a lot of people because you have Ron Paul Incorporated supporting Rand, but if you look at Rand's policies, what he supports, and the interventionist idea that's at complete odds with the voluntarist libertarian movement. But if you think that he's doing what the people in Kentucky want him to do, you might be right. But regardless, it's not here. I'm not here to defend Vladimir Putin. Actually, there's plenty of things that I can say negatively about what they are doing to their own citizenry and their own media, and passing new media laws, trying to basically have complete control over dissidents, and that is something that I don't support. So their domestic policies are dismal. But then again, I go right back to, I don't care. I don't care what's really happening. And the people that are living in Crimea, that are probably, for the most part, ethnic Russians, or at least in support of what's happening there, because they've already been living under Russian influence. Who do you think has been running the government there? Do you think that the compromised and completely criminal government that was previously there was serving those people on the military plateau? No, they were not. I doubt they had much stability, and if it wasn't for the Russian influence and control of pipelines, they would not have any kind of stability. The people are very poor, and if you compare all of the socioeconomic demographics to Europe, integration into the EU would completely bankrupt, and will bankrupt. And ultimately, they do have a central banker that is going to lead them into serfdom and debt saturation by the international community, the IMF. And that's what's so sick about it. They're like, no, these people are all on their own. The new Ukrainian government, they want sovereignty. We have to look at their sovereignty. And then, Jack Lew, the Treasury Secretary, and, Mr. Forbes himself, John Kerry, and the rest of the U.S. crew and the IMF are trying to get them billions of dollars. They are playing chess with Vladimir Putin, which is not necessarily a smart idea, and the win, the payout for all of this is going to be so minimalistic. Even if they do get Ukraine on the hook, and they do get more missile shields and in Poland, and all of the things that Dick Cheney is now going out on the circuit, and probably will be out Sunday afternoon on the Sunday shows, pushing for some more militaristic intervention. None of those things are really going to equate to a lot. It's going to hurt Europe more than it's going to hurt anyone else, because the flat out truth is the Ukrainians aren't going to start World War III for Crimea. They're just not going to do it, and whether by de facto or de jure, the Crimea Peninsula will probably be run by Russian politics and their money for a long time, and have been for, I don't know, centuries. If you have a whole society and economy built around Russian militarism and Russian military bases, who's the master in this scenario? You could go to Norfolk, Virginia, right here in the United States of America, and it's a cesspool and it's a shithole. And I lived there for many years, but if they didn't have the military, the jobs, it would be Detroit. They didn't have the U.S. Navy there. It would be Cape Canaveral. It would be empty and desolate. Look at Cape Canaveral. Perfect example. No NASA, no city, no nothing. I mean, the McDonald's are even closing down there. So that's what happens when you have a huge shift in resources. And most of what we have built here, just like everywhere else, is it's built around central planning and the military, a lot of the infrastructure. Anyway, so the deep state. Let's talk about the deep state. It's a new term, and I like it. I think that it's been overused, but there are people out there that listen to this show that realize that what the sheeple are watching on TV and all of the back and forth talking points by representatives, most of that's crap. It's just for entertainment, really. I mean, there's some things that are getting said, but most people aren't watching them because it's on C-SPAN. So what you get at the end of the day are your talking points as to what happened, what you should be privy to, and that doesn't really scratch the surface. So let's just talk about this. Is the deep state fracturing into disunity? This is an ongoing thought that I have been entertaining, that we really do have different interests, and we have a lot of power brokers that are capitalizing and trying to push their agenda forward. So you have a couple groups, and I just want to talk about the Council on Foreign Relations. If you look at the Council on Foreign Relations, the foreign relations they have are the Fortune 500 companies. Now, if you're a Fortune 500 company, your main goal is to make money. To profit off of globalization and interdependence, and that is what the academics and the thinkers, the wonks, if you will, at the CFR, the International Crisis Group, Chatham House, all of these think tanks, but namely the Council on Foreign Relations, are really ultimately about. If you look at the idea of using international globalization and interdependence to create a world where we don't have things like the invasion. It's not really much of an invasion of Crimea. The idea is that if you have everybody interlinked and everybody is invested in one another so much that the thought of destroying it all over a petty war, petty ego, would not exist. If you have everybody, their own nation states, looking out for themselves, completely beholden to their own general public and the people there domestically, then you have statism or nationalism. That is what is the antithesis of globalization. Now, most of you, and myself included, have noticed that globalization doesn't really help the people. It is usually a big scam, and the Fortune 500 companies use this, from BP to GE, as a way to offshore risk and profits. And it's a great way to create this system. So you have to have this partnership between the Fortune 500 companies, non-governmental organizations, and the policy makers, and the IMF, the World Bank, and the lenders. So you have to have the banking institutions on board, and most of them are. If you look at the World Bank, if you look at the IMF, two Western institutions that have lots and lots of money, very little accountability or scrutiny, mind you, very little presence in public discourse at all. And they're unaccountable, number one. Number two, they're unelected. So they play the biggest role in what happens, not necessarily in this country, but what happens in the world, and that adversely affects the U.S. economy, that adversely affects everything. Everything. So the Council on Foreign Relations, as I see it, my estimation, is really about creating more international globalization, creating treaties and policies that open up places like the Ukraine to the international bankers and to the Fortune 500 companies, energy syndicate, all of them, the oligarchs, the people that put in money that are part of the stakeholders. If you go back and listen to Al Gore, I've played it often, but he's talked about the stakeholders, companies like GE, BP, all of the evil polluters that he talks crap about. Those are actually the stakeholders. They have to work with these companies, and it only makes sense. They have to work with them. Okay? If you want any kind of policy, if you want anything to go forward, you have to work with these people. So that's what the Council on Foreign Relations is really about. Now, they work closely with the CIA. What's the CIA about? It's about foreign relations. It's about foreign control. Excuse me. I think they're using the mind weapon on me. I'm just kidding. That's really what they promote, and their agenda, if you will, is very, very open. They have websites dedicated to them, and they're not really in the now that the international communism is really kind of popular, and people have kind of bought into this and think it's democracy. They've become very out in the open. Richard N. Haas, the head of the CFR, he's in Ukraine. He's also flying around in the private jets with John Kerry and the like. And they are on Joe Scarborough's show along with Mika Brzezinski, Zygmunt, his daughter. So that's kind of their little cabal there, and that's their mission. More money, more open globalization, more markets to tap, more, and most of that is driven by cheap labor. Cheap labor is key to making profits in this day and age. Robotics, technology, industry are changing a lot of that, but at the moment, your iPhone 5S that has the retinal scanner and the fingerprint reader, that's made in China by children. Or young adults that live in Foxconn or some other internment camp where they try to find a way out to get into the democracy, or maybe into a big polluted city where you wear a gas mask, or you don't see the sunrise anymore. It's not a great future for a lot of those people. And people here, that's one of the really sick things I think that we see with all of it, is most of these people that believe that they're just they're making waves and they are changing the world, don't mind cheap exploited labor as long as it makes prices reasonable for them. And with inflation and the amount of costs that go into just about everything now, the amount of debt that you have to accrue to get it, you have this really, really skewed viewpoint of what's good and bad. That's why I really hate the faux green movement, because it cons people into thinking what they're doing is beneficial and that it's helping the world when it's really not. Might not be doing something bad, but it's definitely not helping it. So that's the CFR. We call those neolibs. Those are the neoliberal globalization people, the New World Order folks. Then you have a lot of other crazy people, the neoconservatives, the neocons. Neocons have a lot of power influence. They have a lot of political and military power. They are part and parcel to groups like, well, the Carlyle Group and other investment funds, the Bush regime, the Dick Cheneys. You have the neoconservatives. You have many of these war hawks that believe that rather than international globalization, which is not necessarily a bad thing, you also have to have the military might, and the economy should be built more around industry, defense, militarization. Now, that's okay, but I think that at the end of the day, many of these academics see that as a very short-sighted way to make lots of money and lots of enemies and to keep us in perpetual war. Perpetual war is something that some people may like, but if you're a company, okay, if you're GE, perpetual war is potential risk. You could lose everything if somebody blows up your factory, or if you have, like in France, where you, this is a perfect example in the first world, I guess you could say, where you have factory workers holding their CEOs, their managers, the other management types hostage. It's no good. It's no good. So you have to have a balance somewhere. That's where the Council on Foreign Relations comes in. You gotta mitigate all of those risks. So there's those that want to rule by force and those that want to rule by using globalization. And it's a big thought. It's a big movement. And the difference here is that you have, I think, a lot of people in the intelligence agency, the compromised aspect of the NSA, which is a lot of foreign interests that have been able to push their own doctrine. And at the end of the day, these guys are all making money and trying to push their own agendas. And so you need to have power. And you have a lot of competing groups that have competing interests inside of the own USA, and especially between the NSA and the CIA. NSA, primarily run out of Israel, one of the few institutions that has been able to really exert itself over the last, I would say, 10 to 20 years, especially in Middle Eastern politics. And it's dangerous, because if you give a group like this too much power, then you don't have the ability to steer the ship any longer. And so you're going to have intelligence wars. You're going to have the back and forth. So, Charles Hugh Smith, he hits a note with me here. When we speak of the powers that be, or the deep state, this ruling elite is generally assumed to be monolithic, of one mind, so to speak, unified in worldview, strategy, and goals. I think that that's the big misnomer, is that we have the New World Order, global government, one government. It's way oversimplified and is not ultimately the goal in many people's, in almost every, I don't care which thinker you find, that is not usually the goal. And all except the idea, the notion that you have to have some kind of battle, that you always have to have something to get the people. I mean, this is the Straussian philosophy, that you have to have some kind of mission. People can't just, think about enlightening themselves and, painting paintings. They always have to have some goal, whether it's to kill the Russians or to outdo the Chinese or to get to the moon first or whatever it may be. We always have to have this to win this fight, whatever it may be. So in my view, Charles Hugh Smith writes, this is an oversimplification of a constantly shifting battleground of paradigms and political power between a number of factions and alliances within the deep state. Disagreements are not publicized, of course, but they have become apparent years or decades after the conflict was resolved, usually by one faction winning the hearts and minds and decision makers of the consolidating of the deep state's groupthink around their worldview or strategy. Okay, so they say, hey, you've got to compete. It's just like, it's kind of a democracy within a secret society. When you have 10,000 people that control the world, David Rothkopf's superclass, saying essentially that there's 3,000 people that control the world. the major CEOs, world leaders, and he breaks this down. How they're the Bilderbergers and Davos folks, central bankers primarily. I mean, at least they're on the ground. Look at the Ukraine. I mean, central banking is key, and the people that the U.S. government have put into power are central bankers. So, using economics and money to control the situation, to control politics, is obvious in that example, and it transcends beyond just the Ukraine. So history suggests that this low-intensity conflict within the ruling elite is generally a healthy characteristic of leadership in good times. As times grow more troubled, however, the unity of the ruling elite fractures into irreconcilable political disunity, which becomes a proximate cause of the dissolution of the empire if it continues. So you have a lot of people who are like, oh, these freaking idiots are listening to the damn guys at AIPAC. Okay, they keep blowing up all of this stuff. They're pissing off everybody in Gaza. Okay, this is unproductive. We need to get this. We got to stop giving Netanyahu too much power. Okay, not everybody. Some people are like, we love this guy. Let's give him all the money in the world. Even your Congress. Well, oh, yeah, because God forbid they dare say that we shouldn't give Bibi money. It's political suicide. You'll become anti-Semitic in about 10 minutes. But there's plenty of people who are like, this guy's a nut job. I mean, we saw that, only years later with Nixon talking about the weirdos and freaks and gay folk at the Bohemian Grove. Saying, oh, they're a bunch of dang queers. Because deep down inside, I mean, they're just people too. And they're like, oh, this guy. We gotta go listen to BB again, over and over again. He's always banging the drum, and he always wants more money. So after a while, and he's screwing this up. We could get this other deal. Chevron was going to give my brother-in-law a lot of money, but dang it. Now we got this guy screwing it all up, blowing up the Leviathan pipe field. When things go right and you have the unification, okay, we need to get rid of Gaddafi. Okay, that's great. But when you you go in there and you try to build what did they have? The Cinnabon company was the first U.S. company to move in there. And, there's no Cinnabons anymore. Cinnabon lost a lot of money. So there's some guy grumbling like, oh, these idiots told me to spend $5 million on these Cinnabon stands at the Libyan malls. I got scammed. So anyway, just to kind of, throw a hypothesis or I guess a scenario, a fake scenario into the mix. But you get the idea. I mean, the kind of bickering that goes on in your house happens between people that make lots and lots of money. And if you're somebody who's really super rich and elite and you believe you write papers like a Cass Sustine or a John Kerry where you've written books or at least had people write books for you, you're opinionated. You think you're smarter than everybody else. So the constant bickering and ultimately bad, strong decisions that are being made, concessions by which people, end up losing, then people start bickering. We can't listen to BB again, or we can't listen to this guy again. He keeps just blowing shit up. It's no good. So anyway, continuing here, recently I proposed, Charles Hugh Smith that is, the idea that Wall Street now poses a strategic threat to national security and thus the deep state itself, who gets thrown under the bus in the next financial crisis. Okay, we know that there's a lot of bankers dying. John Corzine's son just got real sad, and committed suicide. And, think about that for a moment. You have somebody like John Corzine. I mean, the guy's above the law. He can screw bankers and his own he didn't screw, but he could have screwed over all of his investors and people that had put a lot of money into his practice, ended up losing on it. But, a guy that's above the law, governor of New Jersey, pretty famous, has a model wife, and you would think, man, he's got the best life in the world. He's living high on the hog, and then his own son, commits suicide or something else happen. Who knows? But the investigation will probably The family already has come to grips and said that they don't believe that. They believe that he was suicidal. Maybe he was, but, you have everything in the world, but do you? So for all the people out there that think, oh, man, these guys, they live the best life in the world, it's pretty sad and tragic there, too. I think that it gives me reason for pause and to think about how wonderful my world really is in comparison to, a John Corzine. And that's, if his kid was suicided by somebody else, it shows you even more to suggest that there is a fracture in the deep state. So going back to the article here, the good question that Charles asked, who gets thrown under the bus during the next financial crisis? Okay, so, Wall Street. I mean, the toppling of governments and the coordination of the events that are happening, I mean, really pivotal events are being dictated by, we've heard about them. I mean, crazy, rich investment bankers that are, living high on the hog, and they are, coked out of their minds. Now, if you're somebody like John Brennan, who speaks, 3 languages? He speaks Farsi. I mean, these people see, crazy CEOs that are riding around in Maseratis on Wall Street as a potential risk to what they're building. If you're an international globalist, you might not talk about how Wall Street's the biggest threat, but isn't it? If you're carefully and calculatedly building a new world order, then you just have, John Corzine blowing up everything over here. You got to find a way to shift that power back to you. How do you control these people? You got to control them because they can't control themselves. We've seen the statistics. We know that Wall Street bankers, impulsive. It's important they're impulsive. They have to be willing to gamble. Okay, so if you're building a new world order, you don't just want somebody that's like, I'm all in. Give me 10 million on black. You don't want that. You want the exact opposite. Many consider it impossible that Wall Street could possibly lose its political grip on the nation's throat, but I suggest that Wall Street has overreached and is now teetering at the top of the S-curve, i.e., it has reached peak Wall Street. Peak Wall Street. I like it. It could be. It could very well be. Because you have a lot of uncertainty when you are working all these schemes. And the winners and losers are vastly separated. The people that win big, and the people that lose really big. So consider what extremes of Wall Street, the Federal Reserve, predation, parasitism, avarice, and power have done to the nation, and then ask if other factions within the deep state are blind to the destructive consequences. We had a couple other pieces here. The distribution of wealth. We heard this week that we have more and more millionaires in this country, more and more of them. And I guess that's impressive, but when somebody like a Tom Brady, the quarterback of the Patriots, I was looking, and this is a few months back, but he's got a pad, $5 million pad in really, I think it was in California, I'm pretty sure. Really nice place. And you're looking at it, and this is one of few homes he has. He has a castle with a moat, because if you have a castle, you have to have a moat. I mean, come on now. You never know when somebody's going to storm the castle. You just look at Ukraine. So the football player, mind you. But I was looking at it, and I'm like, man, that's a really nice bathroom. It's really, really, really nice. But for $5 million, $5 million, if you're a millionaire, you can buy a fifth of that house. So what does it really mean to be a millionaire? And when you look at the house, it's impressive, it's cool, but it's not like, oh. It is to you and I because, we don't have $5 million homes. But, I wasn't as impressed as much as you would think. And just this week, they talked about how, a London flat, an apartment in London is going to cost you $50 million in 2030 or 2020. And looking out and just here in downtown Austin, if you want to live in the skyscape, you want a view of downtown in one of these, big skyscrapers. A 1-1, and you probably have to pay separately for parking. You're in the $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month range, even if you buy these things. I mean, it's very little. It's very little for the money. Huge point being that inflation has completely skewed all of these things that seem great. Ooh, we got more millionaires. Yeah, but being a millionaire isn't... I mean, you can't just say, hey, I'm a millionaire, and then, go off to Boca Raton and retire. It's just not that easy. You better invest, and you're going to have to get a return on that money to be able to continue to live, because $1 million, it's not going to get you what you think it would. So anyway, I mean, this is a great article. He breaks down a lot more here. He says he recently discussed the deep state and throwing Wall Street under the bus, and with my friend and colleague Jim Kunstler, the resulting podcast, and you can check that out. It's linked up at blacklistednews.com. I listened to it, and it's a great point. I think I'm going to have Charles probably on the show, or try to meet up with him and do that. I've had so many shows in the hopper. We recently released the interview with Steve Horn last week that had a great response, a lot of questions, and a lot of people appreciate being able to talk to somebody that's kind of a global warmingist and somebody who's also a realist and looks at how the green movement is being used to enrich Wall Street and not really to offset or help the environment, and talked about a lot of these political costs that are attached to these things, like the XL or Keystone and Keystone XL pipelines and all of the other pipelines. We went through pipelines in the national pipeline system here in this country, and how it's being used to take people's land away, eminent domain. And you'll see right away that the compromised alternative media, a lot of them, don't care about eminent domain when it's a pipeline that has oil. Go look around. Go look around and see how many people in the quote-unquote alternative media care about eminent domain when it's a pipeline. Not as many. You'd be surprised. So anyway, he was one of the few that has been calling it like it is, and talks about the shysters and how there's all these people that think that they're doing a great job and helping the environment by buying Priuses. But the reality is, if you're a truthful person and you really care about the truth, that's not helping the environment. It might actually be hurting the environment. So Steve's honest. He might have an opinion on global warming, man-made global warming that I disagree with, but we both agree that these solutions that are being put forward, and mind you, people are spending billions of dollars on, are not helping the environment. That's what's so frustrating. I just want to shake people sometimes. Just please realize that even if I'm wrong, what you're doing is not doing anything for the environment, maybe for your ego, maybe making you feel better about it. And then we kind of break down, well, people just want to feel like they're doing something good, so you have to give them something to do. It's like, it's not productive. All right, so we played Sheila Jackson Lee. I've got a few other things just to talk about the environment for a moment. I saw this article, and you would think it would have got a lot more attention, but it also shows you that the media has no interest in, making you aware of things that are really, really important to know. Peeing in pools, who hasn't done it? 1 of 5 of you listening to this podcast can actually create dangerous neurotoxin cocktails that you swim in. Wish I would have known. Good thing I can speak from experience here. If you pee in a pool, you're not going to die, because I've done that and I didn't die. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that I won't get sick from it later. Anyway, this is pretty shocking. It came from the LA Times, and I just think it's a takeaway when we talk about water, fluoridation, and all of the other things that get thrown into the mix. And if you're not filtering water, you might be getting some of this neurotoxin, because pee and chlorine and pool chemicals in the water supply are not uncommon. 20% of Americans urinating. One survey says that 20% of Americans urinating where others swim is normal. Besides being disgusting, peeing in the pool may seriously be harmful to your health. In a new study, researchers from China's Agricultural University and Purdue looked at what happened when uric acid, a byproduct of urine, and chlorine combined. The group found dangerous chemical reactions, which were a result of this unholy union. The combo kicks up cyanogen chloride, a gas. You can guess where it goes. It attacks your nervous system, heart, and lungs if it's inhaled. Uric acid is linked to 24 to 68% of the byproduct of pool water. So, you wonder why all those rich people that hang out in pools all day long are sick and sad. Maybe it's because they're breathing neurotoxin cocktails. So I thought about that. And this came out today, and it's not a big story either. You're not going to hear about it on your nightly news. Tap water contaminants castrating frogs. And this isn't to sell water filters. This is just to show you the real environmental issues that we have in this country. And that's why I hate the faux agenda. That's why I hate Al Gore passionately, because they don't focus on things that we should be focusing on, okay? Like having a bunch of frogs and people, ultimately, that may be chemically castrated. If you want people, if you like the idea of everybody in the country being a eunuch, if you wonder why we have all the weird things going on, we've always had weird things going on, but we've never had so many chemicals, and we've never lived in such a toxic soup of waste. The good side of this is that humans adapt. We can adapt and live in anything, and if you look at there was this lake, a river. It was a river in I think it was in Illinois, that is completely filled with PCBs. And there's fish that are thriving. Not only are they living, they're thriving there. Now, they have mutated. People and animals can mutate to just about anything. Sometimes mutations are positive, like the X-Men comic books. Sometimes they're not good at all. One of these, an herbicide that contaminates the tap water consumed by millions of Americans, has been found to produce gender-bending effects in male frogs, chemically castrating some and turning others into females. Isn't that nice? Wonder how many female children that used to be boys are now... And I hate doing this, because it's not to say that all these weird transgendered people, and it's not that they're weird, it's weird to me. That people that think that they're women but they're actually men, or somewhere in between, and people are in between. Now we have a lot of different designations for that, just like everything. We have new designations for just about any kind of phobia or syndrome you can imagine. So, does this play a role? Is this actually changing human beings? Studies suggest that it is. It absolutely is. So that's not to be fearful of taking a swim in a lake or a river or any of those things. I think a lot of that has, or to be fearful of rain, because I think when you have 90% of the water supply that has, and we're talking about maybe millions and billions here. I mean, wildlife is much more susceptible to these minor changes. They're much more what's the word I'm looking for? They are just more susceptible to things like this. I mean, you can give amino acids and antioxidants to lab rats, and sometimes they'll grow tumors. It doesn't mean that you will. And I try to mitigate this because I don't want people to be in perpetual fear of this, of the water system. And, go buy yourself a Doug Owens sponsored water filter. But, I mean, it's a way of mitigating it. Some of it you're not going to get away from, and, trying to, get all of these chemicals, which may or may not play much of a role in your own life. But, I mean, the better the water you drink, the more you try to have healthy water. Maybe you can't get this out, but you can, probably get a lot of BPA and other things out of your drinking water if you filter it correctly, if you want. I look at some of the numbers here, and when you start talking about billionths It's like, okay, well, maybe if you if you never got out of the water for 72 years of your life, maybe it would have some minimal effect. So what it's doing to frogs is horrific. It should be an issue. It should be what we should be focusing on when we talk about the environment. This should be something not to scare people, but to redirect them towards what we should really be focusing on, rather than, enriching a bunch of people like Al Gore. So that's my point there. Hey, everyone, we're at the hour point here, a little bit over, actually. Want to thank you for tuning in for the live broadcast. You can do that Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Online in the meantime, blacklistedradio.com is where we will be posting not only this show later today, but other ones that we have recorded throughout the week. And we'll be releasing them over the next week. So you can keep up with us. BLN Radio is our Twitter handle. The news feed is at blacklistednews.com. Hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll be back next Saturday for another live edition of Blacklisted News Radio. Until then, take care.